Hello and welcome to the A-Form Show. My name is Alan George and thank you very much for tuning in. Each week, we sit across from thought leaders and change makers in the architecture and design space of the GCC. We dive deep into their experiences, both professionally and personally, and share their valuable insight as to what makes them tick. Our goal is to add value to your day and help you navigate your own personal creative journey. Finally, the opinions and the views of the guest speakers are that of their own. They do not necessarily represent the views and the opinions of the show or the host. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we are joined by Indu Varanasi, founder and design director of IR Design. With well over 2 decades of professional experience, Indu is known for her holistic approach to design and all its facets. She has been part of many award-winning projects in the region across various market sectors. Indu has been an active participant in both the design and business community as well. She is not one to shy away from engaging and pushing the important conversations forward with design talks, columns, workshops, and many more. She truly embodies the statement of being inspired in design and disciplined in action. Outside of the region, IRD have capitalized on market opportunities across the world. Indu has led projects across China, India, Tanzania, Oman, and Sudan. This truly gives her a global outlook with very local context. We are super excited to have her on the show. So without further ado, let's get into it. Awesome. Welcome to the show, Indu. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, as I said before, this will be a quick rolling start. When I was doing research on you, a word that kept coming up in association with you was holistic design. So, if you can maybe start us off with what, in your opinion, truly is holistic design?
Holistic as a word is like something which is part of a whole. So when you say architecture consists of elements of lighting, flooring, walls, finishes, but the end product is always a combination of all. To give you an analogy, it's like a recipe, yeah? So you have so many ingredients. Everybody has those ingredients, but when a sort of super chef puts it together, it tastes very well.
True.
And so it's adding the right ingredients, the right amount at the right time.
Right.
And then also serving it well. It's exactly the same thing. You have so many trades coming in together to have the knowledge of using what at what time, for which project, in what budget.
Right.
They should not be isolated. We as a profession are a team profession, right? If I say I designed a building, no, there's 200 eyes behind me.
True.
So when all of them come together and have a general knowledge of what they are doing towards what aim, and that's when it is holistic design.
Okay.
So typically in many firms, I have worked also, we work in silos, right? So the guy
there's always a department of somebody somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he doesn't know why you're doing it. So the MEP guy typically will not even have a furniture layout.
Right.
And the supply air grill will be right on the head of somebody. Yeah?
True.
And one doesn't realize, but at some point of time, that is what causes sick building syndrome, right?
Right.
This was something which I was extremely conscious of when I started my studio, that everybody should know everything. We are a very small team, so everybody knows which light goes where. So I truly believe that it needs to be complete. It needs
okay.
And I also believe that architects trained for so many years, are capable of learning or will be interested in knowing what they don't know for that project.
True, absolutely. But then where would you stand on, there seems to be this sort of, I guess if you were to go, say, a few decades back, a design firm, like you said, kind of knows everything and kind of designs everything. But obviously, as time has gone on, there are so many specialists and people who, kind of have a niche and basically run an entire office based on that niche. Do you see that as a good thing or as a bad thing?
So I'm not against specialization. What I'm against is when a set of drawings from an architect's office just is passed on to another specialist.
Right.
So the fundamental knowledge should exist. After that, you tell them your wants and what is critical to you as an architect, and they will design around it. And if it is
Right.
not possible, they come back and say why it is. So that dialogue is very important.
Right.
Yes, I mean, architecture and the other services have evolved so much.
Right.
Specialization is important.
Right.
But if you don't have this dialogue, I think that's where it goes away. So you, as an architect, you should have the fundamental rights. You don't need the answers, but you should be able to ask the questions.
That's probably the best explanation I've heard of it so far. You need to be able to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So then do you think firms, which for lack of a better term would be a full service firm, someone like the example you gave before, when they are siloed in their departments, but they're still technically under one roof, do you think the chances of that kind of a company approaching more dialogue is easier as compared to, say, smaller specialists working with each other?
No, I don't think it just matters about the people who are working with each other and the openness. Doesn't matter whether, and with all this technology, it really doesn't matter where you are, right?
Right.
So I think it's just a matter of either picking up the phone or now whichever way you just pick up and say, okay, I want this.
Right.
And be open to the idea that maybe I am not hearing or I'm not understanding what the other person is saying.
Right.
And it doesn't mean to be junior, senior, nothing. I mean,
right.
It's just about a learning process, right?
Right. That actually gives rise to another question, which is, like you said, that conversation from a firm's point of view will be added time, added effort, or added in some way which doesn't necessarily get captured in a schedule or maybe in a fee of any kind. Is that something you agree with?
No. So if you say you and I are at different points working on the same project, and you're a specialist and I'm sort of the general architect, and your drawings come back, I give you my drawings and you come back with your sketches, and I put 200 red comments, which we love to do.
We all love to do that.
And then they will go back again to you.
Right.
And instead of that, if I had called you or you had called me and say, what is it that you really want me to look? And perhaps those comments come down to 1, 2, or 5.
Right.
And suddenly you have reduced the number of revisions, perhaps.
Right.
And you're going in the direction which you want. And this whole paperwork of revision number 20 is not going to be there.
Right.
And I think there's learnings, right? You would tell me, why is it very important, instead of I saying, no, I want it this way.
Right.
Or the either way.
Right.
And I think that collaborative nature is very, very important. We are all working towards the same project.
Of course.
So why say, I've done my best?
Right.
I mean, we can all do our best together.
Right. So now this is from the context of when, say, a designer is working with a designer. When it comes to clients, of course, everyone's been in a situation wherein clients question the value that a designer brings. Most clients, I think in one of your early interviews, you had said most clients sort of come to you saying that we know what we want and we just want you to make it. Mm. And then on the other hand, you may have someone who has no idea what they want and, has no direction, for example. From your experience with regard to the value of a designer, how do you kind of justify the value of a designer to both scenarios?
I mean, design permeates all fields. So whether you don't need to be a designer to say design is required. You design your life, okay? Everybody has certain amount of design. We are specialized at the building trade. Okay. Some guy might be fashion, some guy might be something else, but he's putting together certain unrelated and related features together to make sure that it works together. Okay, it might be a car mechanic. The engine is there, the tires are there, the axle is there. Everything is coming together and sort of working together towards a goal. And that's what the designer does. He questions you on what you want. So in some ways, I like to put it like this. There is the intangible, which you are expressing in words, and there's a tangible physical product. That's the translation. We are the translators.
Okay.
And how do you translate? is that skill,
Okay.
which makes you a good architect, bad architect. If it serves the purpose, you're a good architect. If it doesn't, then you're not.
Fair enough. And because of your experience in the region, when you've dealt with obviously multiple sectors and so on, are you now kind of seeing client requirements change in any way?
Yes and no, Alan. The yes is in the sense that the requirements are extremely vague and sort of on a superlative and a comparative basis. I want better than this.
Right.
Okay. Not understanding that everything has a price. And so you at some point actually sit down and make the design brief for them.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important. However, sometimes it's not taken in the correct thing when you sort of lay down parameters.
Yeah.
Or you're asking too many questions. And I also feel because there's so much competition in the market, the legislation against free design, the qualification of who
can actually do it even. Yeah.
Yes, is not there, and for which I've been fighting for a long time. And I hope something will come out of it. I mean, I don't believe... the reason I say free design is because as I said earlier, if there is a dialogue between collaborators, there's a dialogue between the client.
Right.
And that dialogue is the crucial element to create that foundation for a good design. And if that is not there, I mean, I'm building for myself, right?
Right.
You gave me the space, but I'm building it for myself. Right. So I don't know what you want.
True. That's fair. That makes sense. But let's say that now going to the ideal case, which all us, designers would love, which is it's a really good client. It's a client who's informed, a client who has a very tight brief, is open, obviously, for any direction that you may give. In order to get clients like that, obviously, they're not, dime a dozen. Competition is quite stiff. And there's always this sort of, race to the bottom of who can give the lowest fee with, the best amount of services. So from your experience as IRD, how do you kind of, I don't want to use the word compete, but how do you kind of put your proposal forward in a market of that nature?
So there are a few things which we really like to do. And over the years, we have done it. So how do we decide?
Yeah.
Which client to take and which client not to take?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So as the client decides whether he wants to take us, I think the reverse also is very true.
Yep.
And that discerning thing should be there for all of us. It'll make a world of a difference for our profession, I think.
If we can finally say no.
So I would say a typical client for me, if he gives me a space and say, I need 20 people sitting in this space, he's not my client.
Okay.
The guy who says, make me a place where 20 of my staff can sit and work nicely or have a good experience, he is my client.
Right.
Who values? So the difference is the second guy actually values his employees and values what we can give to him.
Right.
Okay. So in terms to the race to the bottom, sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you don't have to do it. However, our portfolio is very vast and varied. We don't take too many projects. So I think the market of, again, going back to this free design has actually spoiled it a lot. And I think some glaring mistakes in design, which you can see in the market, are actually a result of this because nobody can justify it, I'll give you simple examples, very, very simple examples. In lift lobbies, you have flooring tiles, which are glossy. So how many times will somebody slip and fall?
Right.
It's something so basic. For me, it's very basic.
Right.
Okay. And these other things happen when you say, okay, the PC rate is 40 dirhams.
Right.
Okay, you can have a PC rate with saying that
it needs to be non-glossy tiles.
No, it doesn't need. You give it to a guy who is responsible, he will never put.
Right.
Because you gave it to a guy who doesn't know.
Right.
He's only bothered about 40. He did a good laying. He selected a good quality tile and he laid it nicely. But he doesn't know better.
All right. That is true. That is true. Now that you mentioned that, I think a lot of lift lobbies that I've seen have really glossy tiles.
Yeah.
I should be a little more careful. That's really good insight. And as we were talking earlier, this is the kind of, these subtle things which we want to get out to as, many people as possible. So thank you for that little nugget. That was quite cool. Pivoting a bit to obviously the elephant in the room, in the world, in our generation for that matter. How are you and the office doing at this moment, which is now we're about 6-7 months, I guess, into the world pandemic? How are you doing in terms of your internal processes, in terms of the kind of work that you now take on in light of where the world is?
So actually nothing much has changed.
Okay.
We operate on a very it's a tight ship.
Okay.
We know each other. It takes somebody new about 3 months to get into
the rhythm of things.
But once they know why they are doing it.
Right.
And I think the question of why always comes in.
Right.
Yes, we have struggled with the projects which were supposed to be signed off and never got signed off.
Right.
In the last 3-4 months, we were surviving on the old projects.
Okay.
But now I can see a glimmer of hope. And because we are starting afresh in some ways, all of us, right?
Right.
And I think it's time for newer dialogues also. Just don't build.
Right.
Think, why are you building?
Right. And do you see that clients are actually now starting to have that conversation? Because at least from, what I'm seeing is that people are being a little more thoughtful. They're actually, like you said, taking the time to actually think about what they want, why they want it. They're also thinking about things like longevity in things like hospitality, for example. So do you see those kind of changes happening?
What I found was there are a lot of refurbishments which come into being, and then they start asking the question like what you're saying.
Right.
And materials which can be easily sort of made good, So you have a coat of paint, okay, you just go and put a coat of paint.
Right.
If you want it to look nice and beautiful, you don't need to spend a lot of money doing something else. I think good design isn't, if somebody comes back to me and says good design is expensive, I'll say no.
Okay.
Good design need not be expensive. And that's the message we need to convey again and again.
Okay.
Good design is not expensive and should not be expensive.
Okay.
And that's when I really want our community, which is especially here in the Middle East, to understand that design encompasses us in many, many ways, right? So when you say you're doing the flashiest hotel, it need not win the award,
Right.
So the design value to it is not about because you were able to use the best materials or not best material, more obvious materials. Yeah, they're good. They have a purpose, but that doesn't mean it qualifies for a design award.
Right.
Please look at behind it and say, okay, how in those minimal resources somebody has been able to put the dialogue forward.
Right. So, okay, multiple questions in my head already. So I'll kind of go through them one by one. So when you say good design doesn't have to be expensive, starting off with that, it would seem to me that in order to make that happen, you would obviously need to be innovative to an extent. You would need to obviously know your materials and markets really, really well. Wouldn't that need or require a lot more time when it comes to various projects? I guess the example of your hotel with its finishes probably went down that road because that particular firm had a formula and this is what works and this is how we know it would look and so on. So they can be quite efficient in that sense. So while I agree that good design can be not expensive, how do you then kind of compensate for the level of innovation and time that goes into that process? So
this is the other, if you look at a project life cycle, perhaps design is given the least amount of time.
Yeah, clients, you need to stop like negotiating with our fees and probably start looking at contractor fees. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, it's minuscule, right?
True, in the grand scheme of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when it's minuscule, why is it a case that you don't spend time thinking about how to do it and come onto site and, oh, that thing did not work because there was a duct above it.
Right.
Yeah. So why don't we just plan out? And I think the whole process of planning is so much more important.
But planning not so much in a design context, but in an overall even execution kind of side.
So if your design is done properly from your conceptual stage, when you go into detailed design stage, and you have these X number of collaborators sitting together across the table, everybody knows where their stuff is going, right?
Right.
And when it goes to the contractor, he doesn't then either, as a good contractor, he doesn't have to think much and he does his job.
Right.
And as a bad contractor, he cannot play.
Right.
In both ways, it works. At the end product is that there is very little abortive works.
Right.
And everybody knows, all the stakeholders know what they're going to get.
Right.
And I think this whole aspect of responsibility by all stakeholders, that includes the client, is absolutely the basis of our profession. Where now we keep missing some of the pegs and then we keep falling in that direction.
Right.
And I think it's very important that we need to address these.
Okay. Going back to what you said a little while earlier, which I thought was quite interesting, was now let's say you have a client who does not want to take on that responsibility, who, for lack of a better word, is a typical client that you would otherwise normally get, and is someone that you do not want to work with, like you said earlier. How do you go about actually delicately declining such a client?
Perhaps he would have declined me before I would have. No, but there are two kinds then, yeah. One person who would say that, no, we don't have the time, we have ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And the other guy would say, she said something which I didn't think about it before. Depending upon what other parameters are, they would come back and talk to us.
Right.
Yeah, and perhaps they measure the questions we asked with our competitors also. Sometimes they would come back, sometimes they would not come back. But as my own purpose of having that whole dialogue, I have served it. And I'm sure everybody has their own dialogues, right?
Right.
And I think it's important. Okay, send me an email. Yes, I can send you an email.
But yeah, it's just not the same, really. Yeah, that makes sense. Another question that I had was, going back again to the good design is, or does not have to be expensive. Two major examples which I can think of is typical flooring and typical stone cladding for exteriors, for example. Is there any way which you have come across which can kind of be a very good alternative to those kind of materials?
So, while we talk about technology in various fields, there is a lot of technological innovations in materials.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we are not keeping pace. So I'll give you an example about stone cladding. So we all go about 10 mm thick, 15 mm thick, 20 mm thick. Right. But there are firms which have come up with this aluminum honeycombed backed stone cladding, right?
Yes,
you must have seen them.
Yeah.
If you really want natural material, then that is an alternative. Just imagine how much weight you save.
Right.
Yeah. Whether it works or not, do a sample. By the time you do your design, the thing has actually gone through some sort of process. And of course, they would have all these tests done before it reaches you.
Right.
And I think for us to keep abreast of new materials, new technology is much, much more important. You save a lot of money for the client also.
Right. Okay. Do you think that this is something which could possibly become a new role in offices? Someone who, for lack of a better word, is not a specifications person, but someone who is just keeping ahead in technology in all senses, not just materials, but also in, say, the programs that you use and so on and so forth. Should there be such a role, or should it kind of be everyone in the office kind of takes it upon themselves to be out there and get this information?
So there are two parts to your question. One is about the materials. I think everybody should know.
Okay.
You don't design, you don't cook with, if you don't know your ingredients, you don't cook. That is your ingredient.
Okay.
The other part of it is about technology, as in software programs.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible that everybody comes to the same level. Base level should be there. Some will be better at some things than the other. That's the way the things are. And perhaps sharing knowledge is a different question, is a part of the whole process when you sit in an office. Oh, I can't copy it from there.
Right.
Teach me how to do it. Yeah.
Right. Designers tend to be quite lazy in that sense, which is a good thing, I guess.
I think you should use software as your pen and paper.
Right.
It is another, if you had a lovely pen.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what it is. I mean, if you think that software is something beyond that, and use it. I mean, when you used to paint and you draw, you want a H pencil and a 2H and a 6B or something like that, right?
Right.
You use your grades, so it's exactly the same way.
Okay.
Choose your tool.
A little while earlier, before the interview, we were talking about architectural education, interior design education, or design education generally speaking. The reason why I kind of go to that topic is the topic of tools. That is normally the first place where students actually learn about these tools, how they're used, and so on. And I think we both agreed that there seems to be a sort of disconnect between the process and the product, as you so aptly put before. What do you think are potential ways or processes that can be put into place during education that can actually bridge that gap and make it smaller and actually give more preference to the process rather than the product?
So in terms of, even as practicing architecture, or practicing architects as we all are, we spend a lot of time on the process, yeah. Perhaps nobody sees it.
Right.
However, it leads you to a certain product. In terms of marking students, what is their thought process been to achieve that result is very, very important. As far as tools and skills are concerned, presentation should be just a part of it. Yes, it's a language. You have an idea, you need to communicate. How will you communicate? Our language is drawings. So if you are not able to communicate your drawing, whether it's to your client or it is to the contractor, then you have completely failed. So it's as simple as that. I mean, if that essence of communication is not conveyed, either the student has not understood what you want, either he doesn't have the skill to communicate.
Okay.
So in both ways, he has failed.
True.
So what has he learned? Yes, your as an educator, your role is constantly questioning him. Why?
Right.
You drew that line. Why?
Right. So do you think then, because I'm trying to think again from an education point of view, when students are marked, it would be a little unrealistic to kind of mark each student individually with a certain set of parameters. Then there probably needs to be some level of standardization that applies to all the students. A typical example, which I always see, which I'm sure you have in juries as well, people have put up, plans, elevation sections, and, 2 sections here, 2 elevations and so on, wherein your design doesn't necessarily need, an elevation even. Maybe you need to have, say, 8-9 sections to actually explain what your design is. Most students, when asked that, tend to say, oh, but it was a requirement for the submission. And it was kind of like a tick box that they had to just go through. I understand why standardization like that is there for marking and for grading and so on. But if that's the kind of format that the students are working in, how could they possibly learn to communicate better if they're being forced to kind of work in this framework?
So there is, it's like driving a car on a road. Yeah, there are rules.
Right.
How that rule changes is very important. So I'll give you an example. Every student now works on software.
Right.
I don't think anybody does it drafting anybody. I've actually not seen. I've asked students, they don't even go onto the drafting table. They don't even have 1 year of, hand-drawn drawings. So in that case scenario, let's say we are in a 3rd year architecture or where you've learned a considerable amount of tools. Why do you need sections? You should be able to draw it in 3D.
True.
And why? Because you you are doing everything in a virtual platform. So why you are not able to make sure that the student understands every corner of his design?
True.
And you're trying to get these new software tools into their psyche, but you're not making them think like what the software allows them.
Yeah.
I mean, I would draw when I started my career, I would draw with my hand, and I'm drawing a section because that's the way I need to communicate. But when he has a 3D tool, my God, if you put me 25 years and give me these tools, I think
been a completely different place now. That is a good point, actually. That they have all these softwares, but they're still kind of working with the old framework, which is quite interesting. Maybe we should kind of
every corner is what. So typically the section would be drawn where the least amount of
work is needed.
Yeah, to put it that way, and then you don't know the answer. If you ask any other question, then you don't know the answer.
Right.
And
true.
I mean, I think the tools they have are so nice. I mean, you put your building or your thing in the context in a Google map, you know exactly where you should enter, where you should. There's no ambiguity,
Right.
We are just guessing, that might be the word.
True. I think that's really good insight. That never occurred to me. I think that we, or not we, educators listening in, we probably need to rework a syllabus a bit.
Yeah.
You seem very passionate about education. Clearly, you have a lot of thoughts about it. Is that something you would want to pursue at any point?
I might. I don't know. But not in the regular framework of education, but generally sort of voicing my thoughts and sort of, I don't know, mentoring, if you want to say a word. I don't know that word nicely, but yes, conveying my thoughts to students. But beyond architecture, education for me is very, very important. For me, it's a passport for various things. Education as in a degree is one thing, but education as a thought process is also very important. So if you have a degree, that doesn't mean you are educated. That's the word says you are educated, but I don't think so. But I think that is something I'm really passionate about. You ask me to donate money for this, that, no. But if you ask me to donate money for education of somebody, I will easily do it.
Right.
Is the easiest way to convince me.
Right. Maybe we should get on that. Maybe we actually should kind of put something together. As we're kind of approaching the end of this particular episode, I can't help but think that you are someone who is obviously very passionate about design, very passionate about the process of design. Do you think there were any key moments or key mentors in your career that kind of came along and you found them, and then you're kind of the person that you are now?
I decided on this career very, very early in my life.
Right.
However, I don't think it's just, as I said, for me, design is very broad-based. Since you asked me this question, I'm going to mention two people and why education and designing our own lives is also very, very important. Yeah. First is my mother-in-law. She is the first lady civil engineer in India.
Wow.
I admire her because of the challenges they took, to be there where they were or they are. And then my own mother, who comes from a very so-called aristocratic family where girls' child never went to study, but they did not go out of the house to study. She fought the system, and she went to, so we belong to really the south of India. She fought the system and she said, I have to study. They didn't allow her to do engineering or medicine, so she actually graduated in Sanskrit. And she went to Banaras Hindu University to study. You can imagine this is in the 1950s, and she is coming from the small village in South India where she doesn't know any English, no Hindi. The only language of communication with her teachers or peers is Sanskrit.
Oh.
and she doesn't know the Devanagari script. She is writing Sanskrit in Telugu, which is our language.
Yeah.
So look at this, the conditions in which they actually
Had to do what they did. Yeah.
achieved what they achieved. Yeah, and we are sitting with everything in our hands and said, "Oh, we can't do it."
Right.
No, I don't think there's anything which is impossible. There's always a solution for everything. And design, the key to design, why do you call it design? Yeah, because you want to take the signature off it.
Right.
Okay, so there is a solution to everything. That's why I'm passionate about it. If there is a problem, there is a solution.
I think the phrase that you used earlier, that you should be able to design your life, I think that is something which I have now started very consciously doing. I kind of feel a lot of my 20s basically went in a lot of, submissions, which I don't even remember now, and, projects which I don't even remember basically at this point. And I think that balance is something which I'm very consciously trying to preserve now, not by the typical, work-life balance. I'm saying on a more holistic level. I think it was Jeff Bezos who said it's not work-life balance, it's work-life harmony, that there needs to be harmony between all, these disciplines. And I think very recently I've added myself as an entity to that as well, that I need to kind of be in harmony with myself. How do you sort of encourage your staff and your employees to basically maintain that kind of balance?
It's a very personal question, Alan. I don't think I'm in the position to tell them these things. It's something which has to come very intuitively. Of course, we can have dialogues, but I'm no position. I'm not... when they are professionals, adults.
Right.
And I don't think I'm in a position to say to my employee, "Oh, yes, this is what you're supposed to do." No, I think they're responsible enough for their own lives. And I wouldn't go that route. Of course, I'll say it as one of the senior most people in the office as a casual conversation. But beyond that, no. Right. I think it's... And that's where you need to respect them as individuals,
So it's something which then, I guess, as an individual, they kind of have to have that conversation with themselves.
Yes. And I think that's... See, I think the employer-employee relationship doesn't mean that one is higher and one is lower. It's a respectful relationship. Just the fact that I signed the salary check doesn't make me any superior, yeah?
Right.
I am what I am because they are there.
Right.
I think that is the mutual respect we have.
Okay.
No, we fight, we shout. That's a different question, but we still...
much like a family would.
Yeah, but we mutually respect each other for what we have or what we give.
Okay. That's really good to hear. The last question I have is actually not a question. It's more of an open platform, which is something that we're starting to do now with our guests. If there is one topic or one area, one conversation, or anything which is currently in your mind, which you think we as a design community should be discussing, talking about, giving attention to, what do you think that is? It can be across any field, any sector.
Two things. One is design legislation. Okay.
In terms of?
Yes. So few things. One is who can practice design. Okay.
Okay.
So you won't become an architect without 5.5 years of study plus whatever you have done. So you have a qualification. A lawyer has it, a doctor has it, everybody has it. Why don't we have it?
Right.
Especially in the interior architecture field, there is no qualification. So I want that qualification. I am ready to put my stamp on my drawing. I want others to put it. And if something happens, I'm responsible. And that is the point of responsibility where I stand. I want legislation there. Why having that legislation will help you in payment structures. Things like, why do you do free design? No. You devalue yourself. Do you go to a doctor? Whether it works or not, you still pay the consultancy fees, right?
Right.
So why should I do you free design?
Right.
I think the core to what ails our profession is lack of regulation of any sort. And once that regulation is put, that's it. So I'll give you an example. When does best design come in. Yeah, say you have a project. You don't want to go to 20 people. What do? You say, okay, I'm putting it as a design competition.
Right.
Okay, you have your brief, you have everything. Give a minimal amount to these designers. Minimal. Say per square foot, it's 1 dirham. That's it. Yeah. What happens suddenly? You have people who know their next month's salary is going to come, and they are going to work. It's very basic nuances, right? But nothing comes for free. So suddenly you have a project which is registered with an X entity as a design competition. You are going to pay this. And suddenly what happens? The quality of design suddenly goes up.
Right.
So I think you need to understand that this is a livelihood for somebody.
Right. And not just a random number that shows up at the bottom.
Correct.
Of a sheet. That makes sense. And what was the second?
Basically, if you put that legislation through, I think the aspect of a supplier giving free design sort of completely vanishes,
Right. But then, I mean, I'm again thinking from just a firm owner. Would then, by definition, if I have to put my stamp on something, yes, I take ownership of it, but then I also take liability as well.
Yes, of course.
Does that then reflect in my fee? Does my fee change once that happens?
It depends, but that's a dialogue which requires a deeper thought. But I think as a professional, it should go hand in hand, right? Why would you design something where you're not liable for it?
True.
It's the frivolousness of a design. Comes down. I always say there has to be a differentiation between. Let me say a graphic designer. It's a nice picture. You see it. That's it. You don't wear it. You don't stay in it. You don't sit on it.
Right.
So that's what it is. I mean, there is a difference. You can make a beautiful sort of picture out of or a rendering, and it doesn't work. That's not what you are. You are. So when you make that render, you say, yes, I'm capable of building it. I know exactly what goes and how it goes. That's why you're an architect.
Right.
So you're already liable as a commitment, right?
Right.
Yes.
Awesome. Very true. I find myself kind of lacking words at this point because my mind is just sort of racing with so much information. And on that note, I actually want to thank you so much for being part of the show, kind of believing in our vision that we're trying to achieve with this entire podcast. Clearly, you are someone who is very passionate about design, about not just design as a profession, but design as part of your entire lifestyle. And I'm sure there's probably a few people listening to this saying, Indu sounds awesome. I want to meet her and I want to talk. What would be the best way for someone to reach you?
Email is usually the best.
Okay. We'll have that as if you're listening, we'll probably have it in our show notes or description or something like that.
The email is usually the best. I might not respond immediately, but I will respond definitely. No, I really admire you for having this show, and especially here. I think serious dialogue is important. We all are sitting in our beautiful offices and doing our projects which we feel are beautiful. And I think that dialogue is very, very important. Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And on that note, guys, we will catch you guys next week. Fellow A-formers, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being part of our journey, and thank you for the immense support we've been receiving for our episodes. It has and continues to be a very bumpy road, but we wouldn't want it any other way. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought you value, please share this episode with anyone who may benefit from it. But of course, if you loved the episode, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, send us a little DM, and we may just send you a secret link to a secret episode which we've been working on. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. See you next time. Keep sketching.